So we actually have that built into Blox, and it's great to hear that Dash is developing something for that as well, because it's definitely something that can reduce complexity. Unfortunately, I think you're kind of the only ones maybe thinking of it, because other blockchains are not necessarily doing that or even considering doing that. And so that's why we've built it into Blox as well, because we understood that people want to see names instead of addresses, especially the accounting and operational kind of side of things.
Hey everyone, I have a fantastic, wonderful pleasure today of speaking with Alon Muroch of Blox.io. How's your day going, Alon?
Going very, very well. How is yours?
Fine so far. I'm
Perfect.
getting ready to learn about something that's very interesting to the crypto world. A lot of people don't really pay attention to at the bottom user level, which is accounting and management and all that kind of business and application. So first, if you wouldn't mind, can you quickly explain what Blox does?
Sure. So Blox is a full-blown management platform for crypto assets. What it means, basically, it gives you a range of features going from tracking all the way to reporting, bookkeeping, export to accounting softwares, cost basis analysis, all of those things, the kind of the fundamental things you need in order to run a crypto business.
Interesting. So how do you view the state of crypto businesses today? I've heard some horror stories about, we call them horror stories, but about people just running something on their own separate Excel spreadsheet, just kind of putting in the crypto stuff separately, even paying directly from that spreadsheet. Do you think that, did you see something like this is very much needed for the industry to grow to where it should go?
I think that what you've described is definitely something which was kind of prevalent. I would say almost 100% of the 99.9% of the businesses basically used and did what you said. But that was 2017, 2018. I think that once crypto really hit the mainstream in terms of people hearing about it and businesses adopting it, then all of a sudden you need much better tools. And I think today, and we certainly feel that, you have more and more of that need, and you have more and more of those offerings. Blox being obviously one of the leaders, but that's definitely something almost all of the business owners and business executives we're speaking with thinking about and trying to get good solutions into their own companies.
How is cryptocurrency really that different from normal forms of payment? So for example, today you usually have bank accounts, you might have some cash transactions, some things like that. And cryptocurrencies are a completely different financial system, which might be one of those reasons why it's taken longer to adopt than, say, something like Apple Pay that just comes out as a simple payment processor. So what are some of the differences with dealing with decentralized cryptocurrencies over just traditional fiat currencies?
I think there are many differences. The first being is that on currencies, whenever you pay with a currency, there's no tax event happening in that particular time and place, which is completely the opposite with crypto assets. Basically, every time you spend, receive, or exchange your crypto assets, basically that's a taxable event, and you need to account for it. But that's kind of the difference everyone knows, I think, by now. But there's more fundamental differences, which are more for the kind of the professional user or companies. One of which is obviously the accounting treatment for those transactions. It's completely different. But also one of the big differences, which greatly increases the kind of the complexity of dealing with crypto assets, is what we call fluidity of account. Basically, it means that in the traditional world, you might have 1, 2, maybe 3 bank accounts, because opening a bank account is something that doesn't happen every day, and it's very kind of manual intensive. In the crypto space, it's the complete opposite. You can open as many wallets as you want. It doesn't cost you anything. It literally takes 1 second. That creates basically is many accounts, which create a much greater complexity. Those accounts are spread around different blockchains, which are different technologies basically, and also different exchanges if you're trading, or different custodianship solutions, and so on and so forth. And so kind of the average Joe finds itself with 10, 20, 30 different wallets, exchanges, or accounts where it's holding crypto assets, and then there's always the movement between them, and so on and so forth. And so the complexity of just managing that is kind of very similar to the complexity of managing anything in a kind of post-internet day, right? You have a ton of information, and everyone is very much busy on how do you organize it and make it accessible. And so I think that's another huge difference when it comes to crypto assets versus traditional finances.
So how is that generally handled? Because when I think of accounts, it's a very simple, it's like a static kind of a thing. I used to have a bank account once upon a time, not anymore. But when I did, a very specific bank account number, etc. Whereas with a cryptocurrency, when I started using Bitcoin back in 2013, there was one address, one public key with the private key. And that makes very much sense from an account perspective. But now you have HD wallets where you have limitless addresses and then assigned to a public key. So for purposes of accounting, do you have a public key as considered an account?
So I think it's very subjective. I think that accounting in general terms speaks about the whereabouts of those assets in terms of what type of they are. It's not necessarily where they are located physically. So that kind of division, you can account for it by yourself. So if you're having an HD wallet, you can say all of those addresses under that wallet is one account, and that account might have a lot of sub wallets. The thing is that that's one of the complexities with Bitcoin, Dash, and all of those HD wallet type of blockchains. But if you're going towards something like Ethereum, where you do have one account, but all of a sudden you have smart contracts, and those smart contracts can actually hold your assets, and so it's a different type of complexity. You can have one Ethereum account, but under that you have maybe 10 different smart contracts holding those assets. It might be smart contracts for trading, or smart contracts for even multi-sig wallets. And so that complexity that is definitely there, and you need to account for it in order to be accurate in your reports, accurate in your tracking, and so on.
Yeah, that makes me think of the soon to released Dash Evolution update, which the biggest thing that it's going to have supposedly is blockchain usernames, to where you have an easy to keep track of username, and then you have all the kinds of addresses from the public key kind of tied to that username. So if you send it to the username, it just requests a new public key, and there you go. Do you think something like that would simplify the process a little, where you can just have like Blox HR or whatever, and then that's all under that?
So we actually have that built into Blox, and it's great to hear that Dash is developing something for that as well, because it's definitely something that can reduce complexity. Unfortunately, I think you're kind of the only ones maybe thinking of it, because other blockchains are not necessarily doing that, or even considering doing that. And so that's why we've built it into Blox as well, because we understood that people want to see names instead of addresses, especially the accounting and operational kind of side of things. And so, yeah, we've baked it into Blox as well. And so we'll be, it's great to see blockchain developers doing that as well.
Yeah, it should probably make integration a lot easier. And that whole space kind of still reminds me of, so I'm one of the very few people in the US that drives a manual transmission car. And I know from having driven old ones, very old ones, there's just so much complexity that goes around that, from, you gotta do rev match when you downshift, you gotta put and then you gotta do a bunch of other little tricks, and then you gotta double shift, you gotta double clutch it in between things. And there's just a bunch of stuff that over time the complexity goes down, 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 until now you have a Tesla, for example, which I don't, but I wish I did. But you have a Tesla that now doesn't have gears. It just goes. It's just that simple. And I have a feeling there's a lot of, I do like the old school vibe of, obviously, from a car perspective, but also from a crypto perspective. However, there's old school, and then there's ancient technology. I don't want to be, I'm tired of, rolling down my own windows. It's like, we don't need to do that. We can have a button for that.
It's funny you should mention, because I definitely think that, if you're looking at technology evolution and adoption, a lot of the key kind of milestones that enable technology to go mainstream is services that really remove friction. I'll give you an example from the development world, right? I mean, 30, 40 years ago, in order for you to build a startup, you actually had to host your own servers. You didn't have anything like GitHub or AWS. Development was very, very difficult. But today, you can realize your tech dream literally, in your garage with, it will cost you $0 because you have all of those kind of supporting services, which make innovation very, very, very cheap, which in turn make a lot of people want to innovate. And so, you have, instead of 1,000 people trying out things, you have 10 million people trying out things. And I think it's definitely something we have to have in the crypto space. You have to have something which lowers the barrier of entry and usage for the technology. And the technology can be as complex as you want, but as long as a service kind of on top of it is easy to use, those services will enable other people to build on top, innovate, and create adoption. And I think that's absolutely fundamental for blockchain to succeed. You can't expect people to know what hash functions are and what public keys are without reducing a lot of that complexity. And so, guys like you, Ledger, for example, and definitely Blox, those services lower the barrier, enabling other people to come in, innovate, and continue forward.
Yeah, that's something I definitely agree with. And I have seen a lot of struggles with people trying to accept cryptocurrency and use it in their business. And especially since I've seen the space in a lot of ways has evolved very slowly in that direction. It's evolved very quickly in terms of how quickly the name gets out there, how quickly people invest, how quickly a lot of technological problems are actually solved. There's a whole lot of innovation. It's that little space between the real world and this. It's still kind of very much of a laboratory experiment sometimes.
Yeah.
It's evolving very quickly in that way, but not really in the personal thing. So because of that, I like to sometimes dramatize and generalize and just say that pretty much no one uses cryptocurrency. Now, that being said, what is the demand for a business like this today? So when you think about demand for using cryptocurrency, relatively low as far as overall overall usage globally, but then for a kind of tailor-made cryptocurrency management and accounting platform, is there a lot of demand for usage of something like that?
You wouldn't believe it. I mean, we started with our enterprise version of the software literally 4 or 5 months ago. 4 or 5 months ago, we had 2 or 3 clients, I think, something like that. Literally, the first few kind of close people who we knew and wanted to test it out. Today, we have over 100, and that's like in 5 months. The demand is there, and I think that the industry is growing very fast, and so we care more about, are we able to keep up with the industry in terms of growth, because it doesn't really matter how many clients we have now. It really matters what we'll have in 2 or 3 and 5 years. And so if you can manage to put yourself on that trajectory and make sure that you can grow as fast as the industry, I think you're golden. And even now, I think we are still talking about crypto winter. And we've launched our enterprise software during the height of crypto winter, and we saw a ton of traction. And so for us, it's been great.
Yeah, it's a good time to start. If you could start and grow during winter, then when spring, summer, whatever, when all that hits, it's going to be the rocket ship. Everything goes off.
Exactly.
Now, what about small merchants? Because usually when you think about these kinds of things, you think, oh, you have a giant company, you have a whole bunch of different payment avenues, you have a bunch of departments, you have just a whole bunch of complexity, and a chunk of that, maybe not even the majority, but a chunk of that might be in cryptocurrency, and so you'd need an advanced solution for something like that. But now what about smaller businesses, like say just a coffee shop with like an owner and 3 employees, something very small in the corner,
Right.
that they decide to take cryptocurrency because they're in New Hampshire like I am, and a lot of places do, right? So are they going to need even be able to afford a solution like Blox?
Yeah, I mean, one of the decisions we said from the get-go was we wanted to lower the price point for such a software because again, we want the adoption to happen through us. And so Block starts from basically $100 a month. We have, small businesses using it for $100 a month, and we have very big businesses paying thousands of dollars a month. And so we have that range and we have that scale for you to grow into. You can start very small and grow into a much more elaborate and costly offering, and we will grow with your business. I would say again that at the end of the day, that the cost really should be if I can save you for $100 a month, if I can save you maybe 1.5 hours of work, that's worth your while, and I can probably save you more. Blox can probably save you more. So it's not necessarily a cost. It's actually reducing just your putting efforts into something which could be automated and could be much simpler than it is.
Yeah, absolutely. What is the biggest challenge when trying to approach cryptocurrency type businesses? It seems like it's an industry that grew up without intent. It kind of grew up clandestine. People just started copying, pasting addresses everywhere. It just kind of like, oh, we'll handle it. And then it seems like a little bit of a mess. What's been one of the biggest problems that you had to kind of overcome in dealing with that whole space?
I think in terms of development, the biggest issue is really how do you normalize and make sure that you have a robust system that can actually bring all the data you need? Because, again, you're dealing with tens of different blockchains. Every single one of them is a different technology. You have exchanges. So you're merging a lot of sources of data into one place, and that creates a lot of problems. And so we've put a lot of efforts in making sure that our system is robust enough to really kind of iron out those bumps on the road. And so it's not just moving from an Excel sheet to an automated system. It's moving from something that is very manual intensive into something which is a sports car. You just don't feel the engine running. You just feel the speed. And so that's a lot of the challenges we had. Obviously, us being Israeli, the company, me and my partner are Israeli. We set up shop in the US, which obviously is a whole different ball game for us. And so, but again, we have our local team, and they're growing, and so that goes well as well. It's, I guess, any other challenge, any other kind of software developers is kind of experiencing out there.
Yeah. Now you mentioned reporting and compliance. So first off, do you think most cryptocurrency businesses are in proper compliance?
I think the mid to high level tiers of those businesses are in compliance. They did a lot of work the past 2 years in order to make sure that they cleaned up the mess. And I think that the newcomers will have much better tools to make sure that they won't kind of repeat those mistakes, right? And so, but again, we're still light years away from what you used to be getting in the traditional space. There's a lot of ground to cover with all the advantage of blockchain technology. We still need to understand that it's an infrastructure technology. It's not a service provider yet. And so you can't expect people to plug into infrastructure and then, have all the features they want, right? I mean, you wouldn't expect people to rewrite their browsers in order to just, load out a page. So if the internet is infrastructure and the browser is a service provider, the same goes here. Blockchain is the infrastructure. We need to still build more and more services on top of it to make it accessible. And so, it's moving very, very fast, but again, it's still, we have a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah. Now regarding tax reporting, etc., that's something you mentioned, is that unlike a lot of traditional accounting systems, you are supposed to report capital gains on every single transaction. So before we get into like the complexity of that, is why first off, how widespread is that? I know that that's the case in the US. Does it tend to be in a lot of other countries?
It's literally that accounting perspective of not treating it as a currency, treating it as there's different classifications, but generally speaking, every single one of them pushes it towards being inventory, and then you have price differences. And so what it means basically is that when you have inventory, when you have untangible non-tangible assets, every single time they switch hands, they have to report capital gains. It's like having any other asset. And so whenever you exchange, deposit, withdraw, whenever you get paid or pay with crypto or exchange those assets, every single one of those points is a taxable event all around the world. Now the differences are how that is treated from the accounting point of view. Obviously, what's the tax rate, and a different kind of treatment of that. But generally speaking, everywhere, I think, at least in modern countries, it's a taxable event every single time.
Yeah. Now, do you think that's permanent and fundamental, or do you think that that's only because recently cryptocurrencies have been, they go up and down all the time? So if you receive a payment and then 3 months from now you want to spend it, it might have a completely different value. Is that the reason it's that way, or do you think it's just fundamentally always going to be that way?
It's just the accounting treatment that regulators around the world decided crypto is. It's not a currency, so or at least they don't see it as a currency, so you can't really classify it as one. And so that's kind of the general consensus around, or from the kind of accounting and regulator point of view, of what crypto is and how they want to treat it. And so I think that, is it permanent? Maybe, I don't know. I think that, by the way, there's a lot of advantages in terms of how fast the technology can be adopted when it's not a currency, if you think about it. There's a lot of limitations on currencies. There's a lot of regulation around sovereign currencies. And so in terms of tax, it's not the greatest thing, but in terms of adoption, I think it is. And so you have that, the advantages, the disadvantages. I don't think they will change their mind in the next few years.
So it basically is up to the services, wallets, providers, everything else, to start figuring out how to make those calculations automated so people don't see them. Do you think that's a good perspective?
I think it's a very, very complicated job, and I'll tell you why. Because even if you are an exchange or a wallet, your user only has a fraction of their assets in your custody. And so you can't really calculate their, most of the tax authorities around the world are using FIFO as a method of calculating tax, or at least the gains and losses. And so as long as you don't have the full picture of that particular user, it's very hard to calculate FIFO or any other method for him, because you only have a portion of the data. I think that it will be up to the user themselves to use something like Blox, connect all of their wallets, all of their exchange accounts, and then start calculating. I don't think that Binance or Coinbase will be able to accurately calculate just because you don't have all of your assets in Binance or Coinbase.
Yeah, so this is just kind of a random thought, because I see a lot of different wallets are starting to integrate different services. For regular consumer grade wallets, is there any kind of a demand to have Blox integrated directly in there, where you can just log in with your Blox account and stuff, and then it just automatically adds that wallet to your list of wallets on the platform? And so then at the end of the month or whenever, you can actually just see all of my 5 wallets or whatever that I use. This is where I received, this is what I spent.
We did, we're in talks with a few wallets. Nothing came to fruition yet. But again, we have a very, very good API. And so, if there's anyone interested, we will be more than happy to partner up.
Oh, very interesting. I think that'll definitely be something that will remove a lot of uncertainty for some people. And so as far as those calculations are concerned, it seems like a vast majority of crypto, or maybe a big chunk of cryptocurrency users, tend to not be doing things that way at the present time.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think that at the end of the day, if you're a business, it's your responsibility to be compliant. And if you won't, it will hurt only the business. And if you're an individual, then again, the responsibility is up to you. And so, I definitely encourage people to be, as compliant as possible. I don't think personally, I would never, try to cheat or something like that. And so I think that it's not just a matter of being passive or active. You have to be active. It's not, not knowing or not doing is won't prohibit you from being fined or even worse. And so I think that, it's definitely something recommended to do.
Yeah. Now, there seems to be an interesting vibe between old school crypto users and new school. New school seem to be relatively regular people that are excited in this new technology they've seen floated around and want to sort of start using it from a perspective of where they are today. They want to link their bank account to their exchange, buy it there, make sure they get all their calculations on their tax filings, integrate into large scale, whatever. But back in the old days, not just that there wasn't infrastructure, but also there seems to be a psychological, like a ideological thing about I handle my own stuff. It's no one else's business. And I have noticed this when talking about different reporting type systems and programs for other things, including, say, blockchain analysis, when it comes to helping exchanges be more confident that they're not accepting some stolen funds from somewhere. So I noticed a lot of people start pushing back and just saying, why do we need to be working on this kind of stuff? We shouldn't be partnering with stuff like that, because it's just, accounting is like all these kinds of compliance is just voodoo to get the government to screw us, which is the reason we got into crypto in the first place. So have you noticed a lot of that kind of resistance?
Yeah, I definitely. I think that I think they're far and in between. I don't think that's the majority of people, especially on the businesses. The beautiful thing about open technology is you can choose where on kind of from 1 to 10 where you want to place yourself. You can be as bare bones, bare metal as you want, and you can be the exact opposite. And so that's what open technology enables you to do. I think that the majority of people, 99% of them, will be somewhere in the middle. I think that properties like censorship resistance and transparent and privacy and so on, I think those are very, very important things. I think that they're very important to have them in a functional finance industry. But on the other hand, obviously, you can't expect everyone to be a developer in order to use crypto. And so I think that the truth is it's somewhere in the middle. But again, that's the beauty of open technology. Choose whatever you want, and if it works for you, it works for you. That's great.
Now, prediction time. How long? So let's start with the assumption that someday soonish, as in within our lifetimes, hopefully, cryptocurrency will become widely adopted, will become mass adopted, and whether it replaces fiat currencies or not, it will still be at least on par, at least as regular, to where people won't even think of it as separate. It's just part of the accounting system. How long do you think until that happens? What's your prediction?
I really, really hope that crypto will have a big chunk of the world economy. And my kind of, I don't know, I won't say prediction, but I want to believe that, crypto will be high single digit of the world economy in 10 years. I think that if we'll get there, then it's incredible. I mean, in 20 years to change completely and create an alternative to the modern traditional finance world is unprecedented. And so, if we can get there, then, in 20, 30 years, probably, crypto will be the absolute dominant infrastructure for finances. And that's something I think everyone wants. And so if we can get there, I think that would be incredible.
That's interesting. So 20, 30 years might be the nice nirvana point.
Yeah, I really hope so. I think, again, if we can hit high single digits in 7 to 10 years, then I think that will set up the stage for much greater adoption. I think, again, you're talking about infrastructure level, right? It's not apps versus websites. It's traditional finance as we know it for the past 300 years to something completely different. So it will take time, but if we can get to single digit, again, world economy, high single digits in 7 to 8 to 10 years, that will be an incredible feat.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure that advanced accounting systems and things like that are going to be a key part of getting that to grow to that level.
I sure hope so.
Which, speaking of which, where can people find more about you and what you do?
So obviously, you're more than welcome to go to our site, blox.io. We have a bunch of information there. And if you have any further questions, feel free to leave us a message. You'll find the information there, and we'll contact you.
All right. That's fantastic. Well, thanks very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.